The air inside that hall was thick before Dr. Umar Johnson even spoke a word. He didn't walk to the podium, he marched, shoulders squared, eyes burning like a man who'd just been dared to tell the truth out loud. Cameras were already rolling, but it didn't matter. He didn't need a script, didn't need permission. What came next would slice through the air like thunder aimed at the heart of modern politics. Because that night, he wasn't calling out a nameless system. He was calling out Barack Obama himself. The crowd went still as his voice boomed through the mic. For years, they'd called him the Prince of Pan-Africanism, the uncompromising mind who demanded discipline, pride, and loyalty from black people around the world. He'd been both preacher and rebel, loved by those who saw him as a guardian of African consciousness, mocked by those who called him a radical. But whether people agreed or not, one thing could never be denied: when Dr. Umar Johnson spoke, he made people listen. He began slow, his tone heavy like a sermon. Back in 2016, he said, a decision was made in the White House that didn't protect our children, it endangered them. He didn't pace. He stood rooted, eyes locked on the audience as if he could see every parent, every teacher, every child through the crowd. And the man behind that decision, he said, voice rising, was Barack Obama, the same man we celebrated as a symbol of progress. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. People shifted in their chairs, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Others leaned in, eager to hear what was coming. Dr. Umar didn't flinch. He pressed forward, his words sharp enough to cut steel. He described how in 2016, the federal government sent letters to every public school district in America. The message, he claimed, was clear: allow children to use the bathroom of the gender they identify with, or lose your federal funding. He recited the words like they were an indictment, not a policy, but a betrayal. If you don't comply, he thundered, they said they'll take your money, take your grants, take your support. So tell me, is that protection, or is that coercion? Every syllable hit with rhythm, with fire, with conviction. This wasn't a calm lecture. It was an emotional trial where he served as judge, witness, and prosecutor all at once. A president who looked like us, he continued, used his power against us. Against our children. Against our families. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some people clapped, others frowned, but no one looked away. For Dr. Umar, this wasn't about bathrooms, it was about what he called the psychological warfare being waged on black youth. He painted a picture of confusion planted in young minds, of innocence being replaced with questions too heavy for a 5-year-old to carry. When a child still learning how to read is being asked to redefine their identity, he shouted, that's not education, that's engineering. He wasn't finished. He pointed his finger toward the ceiling, his voice echoing. Don't let symbols of progress blind you to the substance of policy. Every leader who smiles in your face ain't your ally. Everybody who looks like you, he said slowly, ain't for you, never was, never will be. The audience responded with a mix of applause and discomfort. Some nodded along. Others avoided his gaze. But Dr. Umar didn't stop. He turned the conversation outward, beyond Washington. He brought up Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, calling her a scientific racist who designed programs to limit black births through eugenics. He connected that history to the present, arguing that what began as population control through contraception had now evolved into what he called biological confusion, the normalization of irreversible decisions for children too young to consent. The pills didn't stop us, he said. The shots didn't stop us. So now they target the mind. Gasps filled the room. The camera caught the moment when his tone hardened into something almost prophetic. They have traded chains for choices, he declared, and they're teaching our children to choose their own extinction. Then he shifted his focus toward the Caribbean. Barbados, he said, voice deepening, you are next. The name of the island hung in the air like thunder. He praised Prime Minister Mia Mottley for her leadership but followed it with a challenge sharp enough to sting. Do you stand with the natural order, or will you bow to Western money? Will you let foreign banks buy your children's identity? His words weren't questions, they were warnings. He spoke of organizations like the Barbados Family Planning Association and their international partnerships. He accused them of quietly aligning with global policies that, according to him, mirrored the same ideological blueprint pushed in America. You call it development, he said, but it's infiltration. You call it progress, but it's programming. Silence took over. You could hear the faint hum of cameras recording, the shuffle of a few uneasy feet, the tension of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Then Dr. Umar launched into what he called the real battlefield, the schools. He described scenes that sounded like something pulled from a nightmare. A young boy tells his teacher he feels like a girl. The parents say no. But the teacher calls a counselor, the counselor contacts child services, and suddenly, the state has a file open. They can take your child for disagreeing with your child, he declared. And they call that freedom. He turned his gaze to the parents in the audience. Do you see the trick? He asked. They don't have to chain you anymore. They just need to convince your child that you're the enemy. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Mothers clutched their purses, fathers sat up straighter. He wasn't speaking softly, he was striking nerves. He linked these modern laws to history, reminding everyone that Barbados officially ended slavery in 1834. Yet here we are, he said, watching governments draft bills that can strip mothers and fathers of their authority. Different century, same control. He moved quickly, connecting the past to the present, the local to the global. He spoke of Henry Kissinger's 1974 memorandum, of Jimmy Carter's Global 2000 report, framing them as strategies to limit African populations through subtle, systematic means. When the pill failed, he shouted, they created new ways. When the clinics failed, they went for the classrooms. Every example came with a rhythm, every sentence, a punch. This isn't about compassion, he said. It's about control. The lights glinted off his forehead as he wiped away sweat, pacing now, gesturing with both hands like a preacher in mid-revival. They can't stop our numbers with bullets anymore. So they stop them with beliefs. They convince the child to become something they can never biologically be, and when that transformation is permanent, the lineage ends. No babies. No future. No people. The reaction was split. Some shouted, preach. Others shook their heads. But everyone was trapped in the intensity of the moment. He drew breath and leaned toward the mic. Once your daughter removes what God gave her, she will never bring another African child into this world. Once your son sacrifices his seed, he will never father another African child again. His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with rage. And they call that freedom? He turned his head slowly, scanning the audience. Brothers and sisters, he said softly now, don't you see the pattern? From the slave ships to the courtrooms, from sterilization to education, from welfare to woke politics, the methods changed. But the mission never did. The hall was silent except for the low buzz of cameras still recording, then his tone shifted again, calmer, colder. You see, America has already shown you the script. They normalize confusion, fund compliance, then punish resistance. And now, he said, pointing outward, they want Barbados to play the sequel. He paused to let it sink in. This is not about love. This is not about rights. This is about extinction. The audience froze. Even those who disagreed couldn't ignore the conviction in his voice. He wasn't just giving a speech, he was painting an apocalypse, one law at a time. He ended the first half of his address with a sentence that sounded like a prophecy. America wrote the blueprint. Barbados, you are next. Applause erupted, not polite, not uniform, but chaotic, divided. Some clapped in praise, others out of disbelief, but all could feel the weight of what had just been said, and as the echoes faded, Dr. Umar Johnson stood unmoved. His eyes stayed locked on the audience as if daring them to look away. He had said what he came to say, and whether they called him a hero or a heretic. He knew one thing, they would remember his words long after the lights dimmed. When the clapping finally faded, Dr. Umar Johnson wasn't finished. He stood still, chest rising and falling, eyes scanning the crowd like a general watching his troops after battle. Don't leave yet, he said, his voice calm now, almost quiet. Because the storm hasn't even started. The words rolled through the hall like distant thunder. People leaned forward again. He had turned the energy from applause into suspense with a single sentence. He started pacing slowly. They told you this is about inclusion, he said. They told you it's about safety. But tell me, since when did protecting children mean confusing them? He pointed toward a group of parents in the front row. You raise your child for 10 years, teach them right from wrong, teach them discipline, faith, and love. Then one day a school counselor tells that child you were wrong. Who do you think your baby will believe? The crowd stirred uneasily. That, he said, slamming his hand on the podium, is how they destroy a family without ever touching it. He drew a deep breath. When I was a boy, he continued, our elders warned us that the enemy would change his face. No longer chains. No longer guns. But ideas. Words. Curriculum. His tone rose with every syllable. And they were right. He described how, in his view, the new war wasn't fought in streets but in classrooms, where 5-year-olds learned phrases they couldn't even spell, where cartoons carried hidden messages, and where children began doubting their reflection before they even understood self-respect. You don't need a plantation when the mind is the field, he said. A few people shouted amen. Others sat frozen, then he moved to what he called the final phase. He said that in America, policies had already allowed schools to override parents. A child could claim a new identity. Teachers could hide it from home. Doctors could prescribe treatments under secrecy laws. They call it gender-affirming care, Dr. Umar said, but what it affirms is dependency. Once your child takes that path, they belong to the system, not to you. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. And now Barbados is being offered that same deal, disguised as progress. He described the upcoming child protection bill as a Trojan horse. They tell you it's to keep children safe, he said, but hidden inside are clauses that weaken parental rights. Once the ink dries, you'll wake up one morning and realize your child belongs to the government. The hall went quiet. You could almost hear hearts pounding. Doctor Umar began connecting dots again, stringing names and years together like a detective unveiling a map. He spoke of Henry Kissinger's 1974 Memorandum on Population Growth, of Jimmy Carter's Global 2000 report, and of how both, according to him, targeted the developing world, especially Africa. They tried pills, they tried sterilization, they tried propaganda, he said, but African life kept multiplying. So now they attack identity. Because if you confuse the child, you erase the future. His voice grew rough, but his words were deliberate. This is not just culture. This is strategy. He walked from one end of the stage to the other. And make no mistake, Barbados is not exempt. You think because you're small they'll ignore you? No. They test the smallest first. If it works here, it spreads everywhere. Someone shouted from the back, so what do we do? Dr. Umar turned toward the sound without hesitation. You resist, he said. You teach your children before the schools teach them. You guard your homes. You stop apologizing for being who you are. The audience erupted in applause again, but he raised a hand to quiet them. Clapping won't save you, he said. Action will. He paused, letting the moment breathe. Then, more softly, 5-year-olds are too young. 7-year-olds are too young. 10, 11, 12-year-olds are too young. His voice broke into rhythm, a chant echoing through the hall. That is not the job of the school. That is the job of the family, the community, the culture. The words came like waves, slow, steady, unrelenting, then he shifted from policy to emotion. He spoke of children who had undergone irreversible changes before they were even teenagers. Once a little girl removes her womb, he said, there are no more African daughters coming from her line. Once a young boy gives up what makes him a man, there are no more African sons born through him. His hand trembled slightly as he hit the podium. You can't reverse that. You can't repent that. That's forever. The room felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. He continued, this is not just a social issue. This is spiritual warfare. They want to break the natural order, man, woman, child, and replace it with confusion. Because a confused generation is an obedient one. People nodded. A few wiped tears. Look at history, Dr. Umar said. Every time we rise, they redesign the battlefield. When we built families, they built prisons. When we opened schools, they flooded them with drugs. Now that we teach our children pride, they call it hate. It's the same game, different field. His words grew quieter but sharper. They couldn't stop African life with whips. They couldn't stop it with bullets. So now they stop it with belief. He raised his head and looked straight into the camera. That's why I'm here. To tell you the war never ended, it just changed clothes. The audience erupted again, cheers, claps, shouts of tell it. But Dr. Umar Johnson didn't smile. He just nodded slowly, as if mourning what he was describing. He reminded them that Barbados, though independent, still moved under foreign loans, foreign aid, and foreign approval. When they say they'll cut funding, he said, what they really mean is they'll starve you into submission. That's what Obama's directive did in 2016. It wasn't an offer, it was a threat. And now those same tactics are being exported here. He walked back to the center of the stage. The first black president of the United States, he said softly, became the first to co-sign the confusion of black children. History will remember that. And so will we. A hush fell over the hall, then his voice deepened again. You think this is about love? About acceptance? This is about numbers. Control the womb, control the future. Control the mind, control the generation. He pointed upward. The writing is on the wall. America showed you the blueprint. If you don't resist, Barbados, your story ends the same way. He stepped back from the podium for a moment, then returned for the final blow. They call it inclusion, but it's intrusion. They call it freedom, but it's a formula. They want to re-engineer the next century, and they're starting with your children. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from weight. He took one final breath. So when your government tells you it's just policy, ask them this: how many generations are you willing to trade for compliance? How many sons must disappear before you notice the pattern? How many daughters must lose their wombs before you say enough? The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Another joined. Then another. Until the entire hall shook with the sound of divided applause, part belief, part disbelief, part fear. Dr. Umar Johnson closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he said quietly, it doesn't matter if you agree with me tonight. It matters that you think. He looked around one last time. Because the battle isn't coming, it's already here. He stepped away from the podium. Cameras flashed, people shouted questions, but he didn't turn back. The echo of his words lingered in the air like smoke after gunfire, and as the crowd spilled into the night, some inspired, some furious, some silent, one truth was undeniable: Dr. Umar Johnson had once again turned a microphone into a weapon. Whether his warning was prophecy or paranoia, nobody could say. But everyone who heard him left asking the same haunting question: what if he was right?